Okay, so the Bible is a story. The Bible is a book. All right, we know the trajectory that it's taking now, that heaven is moving down to earth. Now we're introduced to the main subject of the book. The main person of the book is... Okay, yeah, so it is the name of your church. It is the Trinity, okay? And so it is God the Father revealing himself through the Son, according to the Spirit, to the glory of God the Father. And so God is the main character of the book. And how do we know this? Well, we know this by being good readers of the story, right? And so let me just throw these thoughts at you, okay? God is the main subject of the first sentence. Just absorb all this in. He's the main subject of the first sentence. Yeah, look at your Bibles, guys, if you've got them. Just absorb this. He's the main subject of the first sentence. He's the main character of the first narrative. When you start reading through the book of Genesis, you find that people in Genesis have multiple names. Who's a character in Genesis that gets a different name? Abraham? Sarah? Jacob? Okay, why do they get different names? They get different names in terms of character development, right? Jacob means heel grabber or tripper upper. And so it means he fights for himself. Like Jacob's running a race, he kicks the guy's leg out next to him to win. That's Jacob, okay? So Jacob fights to get ahead. That's what his name means. God changes his name. The angel of the Lord that he's wrestling changes his name to Israel, okay? Isra means to fight. El means God. So Jacob's new name is a play on words, right? Basically what God's saying to him is, Jacob, you've fought God your whole life and won. How did he win? Because I was already going to give you blessing. I had already determined it before you did anything good or bad. While you were still in your mother's womb, I told Rebekah who was going to serve who. And you were on top. I'm giving the kingdom to you, but you took it. Through your conniving, you fought me and got it when I was going to give it. So you fought God your whole life. Now I'm changing your name to let me fight for you. Instead of fighting God, let God fight for you. And we know he does that because in that story, in that narrative, Jacob is about to meet, he wrestles God at Penuel. He's about to meet his greatest fear his whole life. It's like if you guys have ever had something that you dreaded, like just dreaded this day coming, when there was a reckoning that was going to take place and you just didn't know how it was going to go. It could change your life forever. That's what Jacob was facing. And what was it? Esau. 20 years of dread for this day. And he gets there and he's fighting again. He's arranging his people. He's arranging gifts. He's manipulating the situation even after he fights with God. And as he's getting he's doing well actually before a servant runs to him and says, hey, Esau's like running to you and he's got 400 men with him. Then Jacob scrambles and he fights for himself and he arranges his troops and gifts and all this stuff. And then he goes and he meets Esau, and Esau is running to him to do what? To embrace him, to hug him. And he finishes that narrative by saying, Esau, to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Okay? So, He gets his name changed to Israel, and then he watches God fight for him with his greatest foe and fear, which is Esau, and then he watches God totally win, right? And Esau embraces him. And he says, this is what it feels like to let God fight for me. That's what Jacob was supposed to learn from that incident. But here's my point. Why do characters in Genesis get new names? For character development. God also has multiple names in Genesis. Why? Is it the same thing or is it different? It's definitely different. And it's different in the sense that God doesn't need his character like taken from point A to point B. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he's perfect, right? So when God gets a new name, which he does multiple times in Genesis, his new name show the expansiveness of his character. Just different ways to understand him that are all true. He didn't like, hey, I got better today, when he sees Hagar in the wilderness and she calls him the God of seeing. He didn't get better. He wasn't blind and now he can see. It's just that Hagar understood a different facet of God that she hadn't yet. So when people get new names, it's because we need changed. We need heaven to be formed on us because we're still in earth's image. But when God gets a new name, it's to show the expansiveness of his character. Okay? So, multiple names. God has multiple attributes developed or shown to be in the scripture, in the book of Genesis and through the Torah. All powerful, all knowing, all powerful in creation, all knowing in the flood. He knows the thoughts of their inward hearts are evil all the time. He's all present in protection of Jacob and Joseph significantly when they're outside of the land. See, back in that day, they thought that gods had zip codes, where a god was a god of this section or of this environment, the sky or the land or the sea. He had jurisdiction over certain areas, but not over everything. But God shows himself to be God outside of the promised land. And then God is shown to be Trinitarian. Where do we see, and we see this already in Genesis 1, where do we see Trinity in Genesis 1? Let us make man in our image. Very good, yeah. We see it even before that a bit. In the beginning was the heaven, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God. And then we learn from Colossians that when God spoke, what was that? Who was that? It was Christ. So think of the way Jesus is described. John says, in the beginning was the Word. So what you'll find in the New Testament in the way that Jesus is described, Hebrews says, he is the radiance, the exact imprint. He is the image of the invisible God. Okay, so let me ask you a question. If somebody is invisible, how do you become an image of them? Wouldn't an image of something that's invisible also be invisible? Okay, so what you find with Jesus, word, that when I speak, my vocal cords vibrate and my mouth forms and then sound waves, come out formed to you. Radiance, there's a light and the light exudes. It goes out. Jesus is in the bosom of the Father, John says. And so, at the Last Supper, they probably would have laid on their left elbow with their legs out. And if Natsanet was next to me, your head would be right here in my bosom. And that's how we would do it. And you'd be right near. That's Jesus with the Father. So here's the idea. What you find is that if the Father's right here is Jesus. Like the closest thing to him. Like he is the radiance, the Word, in the bosom. It's like to look at me, he says, I think it's to Thomas, is to look at the Father. And so Jesus is the Word. And so right in the very first 3 verses of the Bible, you find Father, Son, and Spirit. And then this culminates in let us make man. And that's a plural name for God in Elohim. Okay, very good. All right, and so, and then you'll find that every appearance of what's called the angel of the Lord in the Torah is Jesus. So when you get to, because you'll find the angel of the Lord do things that only God could do, that the angel of the Lord is to be received in such a way that only God can be received, like he can forgive. Like angels can't forgive, but Jesus can forgive. He's the angel of the Lord. So then if you have this concept of Jesus, which I think is the biblical concept of Jesus, who is the one walking in the garden? Anytime you see a manifestation of God the Father, it's Jesus. And so I think Jesus is that one walking in the garden. Because anything, you have the Father who's invisible, the next thing right here, it's Jesus all the time. And so that's what I think is going on there. So you've got God as the main character of this book. Then you've got, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. Okay, so what this is telling you is, here, let me draw it here. That might be the best way to, uh-oh. Let me get it smaller. There we go. Okay, so let me draw this here. So you've got heaven, and heaven's perfect, and you've got earth, and earth has problem 1, problem 2, problem 3. It's without form, it's void, it's empty, and there's darkness over the surface of the deep. And so what you have then is you've got heaven is perfect, okay? Earth has 3 problems. And the problem, the deepest evidence of the problem is down here. So Earth's problems start up here, but work all the way down here. So heaven has to fix as deep as that goes. So that's the idea. And what this introduces is this concept of deep in the Bible, okay? And deep is a big term in the Bible that has lots of different associations. So sea, the sea, is a scary feature in the Bible. Israel's enemies are referred to as Leviathan, which is like this representative character of the terrible forces of evil. You'll see Rahab as a nickname for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is frequently found in the water. Okay, so this is this building thing. Daniel's 4 beasts. Where do they come out of? The sea, and they're representative of the 4 world empires that are opposed to God. Satan is referred to as a dragon. Okay, so this is this big theme. Now, oftentimes, the nations are referred to as the sea, the tumult of the waters. The roar is like the mighty nations, the Psalms will say. So nations, think of nations when it comes to the deep. Think of that. And so Israel is associated with the water or with the land? Yeah, think of the promised land, right? So Israel is always associated with the land, and so nations always become associated with the water, okay? All right, and so what you'll find is that this theme gets developed. God eats, okay? You get this character of God, and he eats. What does he eat? What's that? What? What does God eat? What smells good to him? Sacrifices. So what does he eat? What kind of food? Meat. He eats meat, okay? What kind of meat does he eat? Bird? Lamb? Goat? Heifer? Bull? Okay? He eats, where are all those located? On the earth, on the land. Okay, what do you see Jesus eating all the time in the New Testament? Fish. Where are fish located? In the sea. What shift happens in the New Testament? God has been ministering to the people of the land or the people of the sea in the Old Testament? He's been ministering to the people of the land. Israel's associated with the land. He's been eating meat all through the Old Testament. But he gets to the New Testament, and is the meat satisfying? No, he's spewing them out of his mouth. The land is going to vomit them out. It doesn't want them anymore because they're profaning his name. So he says, I'm going to stop eating meat. I'm going to forsake that diet, the carnivore diet in that sense, and I'm going to start eating a different type of meat, which is fish. And who's associated with the sea? Gentiles. So that's the shift. And this is something, and I meant to tell you guys at this beginning. In some way, shape, or form, nearly everything I say will either have been assisted and helped or is just straight up taken from a few guys, okay? And I'm sure you've heard their names. James Jordan, Peter Lightheart, Alistair Roberts, Gordon Wenham is another really helpful guy. I'll give you a list of names to pursue further at the end of class. Please don't let me forget that, because I really, this is just a bite, but these guys have a feast. So I want to make sure to give you those venues and ways to get to them. But James Jordan is the one that pointed this one out to me, that God moves from eating meat to eating fish. And it just so happens to correlate with Israel being set on the side to become jealous of the fish. And so he tells his disciples, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And they end up going first to the Jews, but then to the Gentiles, all right? So what this demonstrates is God shifts from the Jews to the Gentiles, and that Jesus has, but this is the big picture, this is the big thought, is that Jesus demonstrates, just like his Father did in Genesis 1 through him, Jesus demonstrates mastery over the sea. Where do we see Jesus demonstrate mastery over the sea aside from bringing in the Gentiles? What kind of stuff does Jesus do with water? He walks on it. He calms it. What does he do with Peter in his boat? Makes his boat almost sink. He commands what's within it. See, all of this is to demonstrate that the sea is just one of those things. It's just another one of these things. Like this, you could just put the sea as one thing over here. And you say, okay, that just seems like one thing in the Bible, but it all correlates in Christ. It all goes there. It all heads there. Okay? And so this is what you find introduced in Genesis here. Okay? So we've got God, we've got the deep, and then let's look at the form and fullness. And we've already touched on this just a bit, but Abel asked an excellent question at break that I want to handle here. Okay, so what I've demonstrated in the beginning of our talk, in the introduction, is that you've got 2 sets of days, right? And each of those days complement each other. Is that thought new to you or familiar? Because I don't want to spend a ton of time on it if it's already familiar. But we can here. So, all right. So you've got day 1, and day 1 is, what is it? It's light, okay? And what we see is that, where is this light coming from? Sun's not created yet. So what is this light? Revelation tells us there will be no need for the sun because it's the glory of the Lord and in the Lamb that will be our light, okay? So light is God's glory in day 1, okay? And then day 2, here's what you have. You've got him create, and Isaiah's excellent point at break when we're answering the question, what are the heavens up here? Well, what you find is that the sky itself isn't created until day 2. But what is the sky called in day 2? The firmament. That's one way it's referred to, but there's another way. He calls it something else. Heaven. He calls the expanse heaven, okay, which is another fact that demonstrates that what does he want on earth? Heaven. So you've got his glory shining down. So God's glory is shining down to the earth, which is another demonstration that he wants heaven to come down to earth, right? And then you've got him calling the skies heavens, which is another indication that he wants heaven to earth. Now, let me throw this question at you. Day 7 is its own day. We'll talk at length about day 7. So it's like completely separate from the other days. It's totally unique, and we'll demonstrate that. But there's a day in the creation narrative of 1 to 6 that isn't said to be good. Every other day is called good, but one day in creation is not referred to as good. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah? What's that? Very good, Doggy. Excellent. And so, why is day 2 not called good? That should bother you. Does it bother you? Huh? It should, right? Why is day 2? Did he mess up? Did we find the first error in the Bible? That's a problem, guys. Day 2 is not called good. The narrator doesn't mess stuff like this up. Any word that's uttered in the Bible, one of the other things I love James Jordan says, he says, the Holy Spirit doesn't waste his breath. So everything that's there and everything that's not there is intentional. It's on purpose. It's meant to catch your eye. This is why you're meant to meditate on the law day and night, because it has little things hidden in it like this that you're meant to notice. You're meant to feast on this and say, wait a minute, why is day 2 not called good when every other day is? Okay. Now, somebody mentioned that the sky is referred to as the firmament, okay? Now, that firmament is an important word. In the Hebrew, the firmament has a very weird description. It's the word that means beaten out metal plate. So, beaten out metal plate. Now, is the sky in the heavens below that metal plate or above it? Don't look at me, look at your texts. Let's read it. And God said, "Let there be a beaten out metal plate in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. So, is this beaten out metal plate above what he calls heaven or below what he calls heaven? Below. That the expanse is like this. Okay, so now I'm going to ask the question again. You know the trajectory God wants to take. He's already told you what he wants to do. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness over the surface of the deep. And then he starts in a top-down fashion to form earth in heaven's image. And then he creates a beaten out metal plate which separates the celestial heavens from earth's heavens. Is that a good or a bad thing based on his mission? It's bad. So the reason he doesn't call day 2 good is because there's a separation between heaven and earth in the form of this expanse that he uses a particular word that makes it materially hard. That if somebody wants to get up there, it's like hitting this ceiling. Dink. There's a barrier. There's a barrier between heaven and earth. That is not good. I won't call it good. Okay, Abel, I haven't forgot about your question. This is all part of answering your question in big picture. Okay? All right. So, guys, what I think there's another reason why day 2 isn't pronounced good. I think one is that there's a barrier, and that barrier is impermanent. If he's going to bring heaven and earth, what needs to go? That beaten out metal plate, it's got to go. Right? Okay? Where does that is that firmament still there today? What fell in the flood? We know the deep opened up, but what came down in the flood? Okay. All right. What do you think that those windows are referring to? The firmament. Okay, so guys, just hang with me a second, okay? Let's talk about this firmament a second. All right. So, you've got the flood. All right. Do people live long before the flood or short? Long. You've got Methuselah who lives nearly, almost 1,000 years. 969 years. Okay? All right, and then what are the lifespans after the flood? What does God say? You'll go to 120 after the flood. Okay? So, you've got this firmament, and in the flood, this firmament collapses. It comes down. This firmament is a barrier between heaven and earth. And one of the ways we know that is because when you look into the throne room of God, what do you see? Anybody? There's a couple passages that peel back the curtain so that we can see into the throne room of God. And what do you see when you look into the throne room of God? You see a glassy sea. Okay, what else? Ezekiel sees it. John sees it. It's something that's over and even around the throne. you see a rainbow. You see a rainbow. When you look at God's throne, one of the things you see, both Ezekiel and John see it, is a rainbow. So, guys, what happened when this beaten down plate came out of creation, which was blocking heaven and earth? So you look up, and it's like looking at the ceiling. Ceiling's gone. What can I see now? I see a rainbow. When the judgment of the flood happened, the barrier between heaven and earth fell, and what did you see? The rainbow, which is around what? The throne of God. So what can we see now when we see the rainbow? You can see into heaven, essentially. Does that make sense? Are you connecting this? Okay, now, what does God say about seeing him? That no man can see me and live. Okay, are you beginning to connect this? There was a firmament in the flood, and people lived upwards to 1,000 years. The firmament collapses, and now you can see into the throne room of God where there's a rainbow. And what happens to the lifespans? They take a nosedive. They plummet. Because now we're exposed to the sun like we never have been before in creation. And the sun, we learn from Revelation, is like the face of Jesus. What does Isaiah say in Isaiah 6 when he sees God? What does he do instantly? What does Peter do when he sees Jesus pull out the catch of fish? What does he say to Jesus? Depart! Get away from me! What does Isaiah say in Isaiah 6? Woe is me! I'm a man of unclean lips. I'm filthy. When man is exposed to the glory of God, he hides like a cockroach when the lights turn on. That's what we do because we're sinful. Because what happens to the guys when they look into the ark? What happens to Nadab and Abihu when they offer strange fire? The glory of the Lord, the fire of the Lord consumes them. Why does God say, don't touch Sinai? You'll die. Right? Okay, guys, here's the thought. Here's what's going on here. There's a firmament. That firmament is impermanent because it's a beaten out sheet of metal, is the way it's described, that separates us from heaven. That firmament will collapse in the flood. Now we will see into God's throne room effectively. And when you see where God is, if you're not fit, what happens to your life? No man can see God and live. Every time someone sees God, they relinquish. They have to get away because it's like looking at just pure purity, and you're impure and I'm impure, and we'll just burn. Like Nadab and Abihu and the 70 that look into the Ark of the Covenant. We will die, okay? So, here's what you find. When judgment falls, what do you see? The glory of God. But if you're not ready for the glory of God, you die. Does this sound like anything else that happens in the Bible? Is there another time where we see the judgment of God fall, and as a result of that judgment, something is broken apart or torn, and all of a sudden you see into the glory of God? Does anything like that happen in the rest of the Bible? What's that? The crucifixion. Judgment falls on Jesus, And the temple curtain tears. What color is the temple curtain? We'll get to this in Exodus. It's blue and purple and scarlet, which is like the sky. That tears, and you see into the throne room of God. But what is the difference between the lifespans that happen with Jesus when judgment falls on him and the lifespans what happened with Noah when judgment breaks and you see into the glory of God? Are lifespans shortened with Jesus' judgment falling or lengthened? What's the difference between Noah and Jesus? Yes, he absorbed the judgment. He absorbed it. And now he's free to give life. So guys, this is what's at play here in Genesis 2, in day 2 of Genesis 1. Why is day 2 not called good? Because there's a barrier. That barrier is going to fall in the flood. I think that's probably another reason it's not called good. God knows this is going to collapse and take out mankind. Okay? So it's not evil, it's just impermanent. It's going to collapse. That will give us a view to the glory of God, which will shorten lifespans. Jesus will cut the curtain as well. He'll cut the firmament. That curtain represents the firmament. It will be cut in Jesus' death, but lifespans will be lengthened in Jesus, whereas they were shortened with Noah because Jesus absorbed the sin and Noah didn't. That's what's at play here in our passage, okay? Okay. All right. Now, one thing I didn't, let's see. There we go. Okay, one thing I didn't get to here in looking at the form and fullness. Oh yeah, and we're getting into the days now. Okay, is this concept of that every day in creation, does it start in the morning or in the evening? Yeah, it starts in the evening. So the day starts in the light or the dark? The day starts in the dark. This is a big point Peter Lightheart makes. That with God in the creation narrative, things start in the dark. Even creation itself started in the dark and then moved to the light. And then every day starts in the dark and moves to the light. And this is a theme that's developed throughout Scripture. What happens to Abram when God cuts covenant with him in Genesis 15? A deep darkness came over the land. When did Passover take place? What time of day? At midnight, at dark, okay? When did Christ come to the earth? How did the shepherds know where to go? Because there was a star, so he came at night. And when did Jesus rise from the grave? And it happens at a particular time. Something's about to happen when Jesus rises from the dead and they look in the tomb. What time of day is that? It's in the transition from darkness to light. You also see this in the Exodus. When they pass through the Red Sea, when do they do it? They do it at night, and when do they step out of the Red Sea? At dawn. And so, what you see being pictured here all the way at the beginning of Genesis that gets picked up time and time and time again throughout the Old Testament into the New is this movement from darkness to light, from darkness to light. And Lightheart goes on to say that's Old Covenant moving to New Covenant. That the Old Covenant is insufficient. It won't do it. Not because it's weak, but because we're dark. We need light. And that light comes in Jesus Christ. That's the movement that started in day one, and I forgot to mention that. It's an important theme to be developed. And let me further that even in salvation. Guys, in the grace of God, we're all believers. Do we still sin? We do. We don't want to, but we do. And so let's talk about sanctification here for a second. Sanctification happens in the same way that this darkness to light movement happens in the Old Testament to the New in Christ. That's how sanctification happens. Where's a perfect verse to demonstrate that in the New Testament? In Paul's letters. Corinthians. He says that we're being transformed from one degree of glory to the next. And this is through the Spirit. So, guys, think of the patience and the grace of God. That in our salvation, it just doesn't go instantly to righteousness. It does positionally, but practically speaking, there is a development. Think of a dial with 100 positions on that dial, right? From one degree of glory to the next. 1 degree, click. That's what God's up to in each of us right now. That you will likely struggle in some way, shape, or form with the sin that you struggle with today till the day you die. But that struggle will take different form. And there will be victory increasing by degree from 1 degree of glory to the next. And what is glory but light? The glory of the Lord is light. Right? So we're in this spectrum of moving from darkness to light. That's what's taking place. And this theme is introduced in the scriptures. Okay, so let's talk about day 3. So you've got light, the glory of the Lord on day 1. You've got the sky, the heavens on day 2 with this firmament. And then you've got day 3. Now, I want you to catch something here. What happens on day 3? What's the thing that takes place on day 3? Okay, what happens? Dry land appears, and then what happens on the dry land? Vegetation. Okay, so guys, just check this out when we look at day 2 and day 3, okay? These are details that you're meant to catch. All right, so think about this. You've got the glory of the Lord coming down in day 1. You've got this firmament and the heavens, and then you come down on the earth's side, and what does the earth do? The land, was it already there? Or did God just make the land? Huh? The indication that it's already there. So he had the land appear. He didn't make the land. He already made it. He just brought it up out of the waters. Key word, brought it up. And then he does the vegetation. And what does the vegetation do? Is vegetation something that we have to dig for? No. What does vegetation do? It goes up. It sprouts. So what you're finding in the creation narrative is heaven is coming down and earth for its side is coming up, which indicates how we are all meant to be. What are we waiting for? What was Abram waiting for? He was waiting for a city that was built by, whose architect and builder was God. So he was looking up and waiting for heaven to come down. But what you'll find is that as we go through the Bible, there are people that don't look up. That there are people that are very comfortable with the earth. And you'll find that when we get into the animals and what makes a clean animal and an unclean animals have a deep association with the earth. Deep association. They live in close proximity to the earth. Okay? So what you need to see here is in each day, you need to look at the trajectory of the way things are told. That it's significant that the expanse and then the heavens, which means God's working down. And then you look at the land, and the land appears, and then it sprouts vegetation, which means it's going up, because they're seeking to meet each other. Best case scenario, because there's no sin present right now. We'll talk, and Abel, I'm still on your question. This is all working towards it. So what you find is like there's movement like this taking place in the creation narrative, okay? All right, so day 3. Now, day 3 moves up. Day 3 is the first to have multiplication. It's the first to multiply. That the vegetation has seeds, and those seeds multiply. All right? So what you'll find is that God is a delegator, and a delegator is he makes friends. He extends his friendship to other things. So he's extending his friendship to vegetation, and he's saying, hey, be like me, multiply. He'll do that with day 4 as well, but he not in the multiply, but in the delegation sense. So he says to the seeds, they can multiply, they can produce. Now, what's significant about that is that each day has a corresponding partner, like we talked about. So day 1's glory corresponds to day 4's luminaries. Day 2's air and water corresponds to birds and fish. And then day 3's vegetation corresponds to humanity. And you're meant to say, because you do this with the first 2 days, this is like that. God's glory is like the luminaries. Sky and water is like birds and fish, right? That doesn't take much guesswork. You don't have to wonder about that. And that's to set you up for day 3 when you say, what's that? Help me out. Separated from the water? Yeah, that's good too. Yeah, that's good too. That's an excellent additional thought. And so how does humanity correspond to vegetation? Okay? We know that there's a deep correspondence because at this point, do humans eat meat? No, they're vegetarians. So they eat this stuff, which means they're like it. And that's to tell you, yeah, but they're like it in other ways too. Because they are meant to be like seeds that through the laying down of their life give fruitfulness. So that when people, like Adam, lay down his life, and what happens to his seed? It splits, does it not? To sprout, it breaks, it splits, it lays down its life, and through that splitting creates life. And so this is the trajectory of mankind, that when he puts Adam in the garden, he says he is to serve. What is serving? What is Natsana dropping his phone and I pick it up and give it to him? I am laying my life down to serve. And what that does is create fruitfulness in Natsana. That's the idea, and it's introduced here. that what is the correspondence between man and vegetation? Well, they eat the vegetation, so we know there's meant to be correspondence. But it's far richer than that. It's far deeper, that we are to correspond to vegetation in the sense that we are like seeds. Jesus, when he's going to the cross, they don't want him to. Philip doesn't want him to go to the cross. And he says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it bears no fruit. So fruitfulness is cultivated by death. Death to self, laying down agendas to serve. That is all starting. Abel, come on up here a second, would you? So this is, guys, if I can just give you an illustration of what the whole Torah on through the rest of the Bible is like, but especially the Torah. This is what the Torah is doing all the time. It's just little nudges. It's just subtle. It's these little cues. It's just like, see? It's just leave it. And there's going to be times that Abel goes like this. I don't see it. And he goes, just wait. You'll see it. Okay, that's it. That's what it's doing. These are all just little hints and nudges. Like, I was telling this to a friend one time, and he said, yeah, he's like, God is like a dad. That if you're putting you guys are putting this ping pong table together, okay? Imagine if the creator of the ping pong table is watching you put it together. And I watched Asias kind of like look at the other guy for a second and try to do something like that, right? If God saw you doing it wrongly, this is what my friend said, and I think he's spot on. You know what he'd say if he saw you doing it wrongly? He'd say this. Oh, you're going to do it like that, huh? Because what does that make you do? Think. And be like, why did he say that? Like, what does that mean? Am I doing it wrong? But he's just, why? Because God in his word is seeking, this sounds sacrilegious, but before he's seeking you to have answers, which he is, what is he seeking above all? Dialogue, fellowship, friendship, interaction. Micah, God, what do you want? Do you want 10,000 rams? Do you want rivers of oil? Do you want my firstborn son? I've told you what I want. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So he writes this book in a way that doesn't just, there it is, do, and you're good, go live your lives. He doesn't do that. That would be terrible for us. That's how the Pharisees read the Bible. And they crucified Jesus according to the law. We need witnesses. Why did they need witnesses? Because the law told them you don't do anything without 2 or 3 witnesses. We need our witnesses. Who's going to step up? We got to follow the law. So 3 guys lie, and they say, okay, and then Jesus, apparently blasphemes. Okay, why did they take his body down from the cross? Because of what Moses said, you can't let somebody hang on a tree. You take them down at sundown. So just think about this, you guys. They followed every jot and tittle of the law. They followed all these minor details and crucified the Son of God. Why? Because they viewed the law as and I'm going to go live my life. They didn't read the law as, why is he talking like this? And I want to think about this. I want to ponder it. I want to talk about it with my friends. I want to get to the point where I talk about the law like searching for rubies, like people actually search for rubies. So this is how the law is meant to be read. We have an association with day 3. Why does mankind have an association with day 3? And it doesn't just stop there. We're to lay our lives down like seeds, but then some people don't do that. You know, Psalms 1 says there are people who don't meditate on the law day and night. They hang out with scoffers. They do that. And you know, those people, they have an association with day 3, and the people who meditate on the law day and night have an association with day 3. But there's 2 different associations. They're both vegetative. What are they? Blessed is the man who makes his meditation the law of God day and night. I'm going to tell you what he's like. He's like a tree that's planted by a stream of water. And he yields its fruit. He doesn't wither when life gets bad. Not so the wicked, not so the ones that don't meditate on his law day and night, but who stand and sit and hang out with scoffers and sinners. You know what they're like? They're like chaff. The wind blows it away, just drives it away. It's the stuff of the seed that we don't want anymore. It was part of it, but it didn't bear fruit, so I don't want it anymore. Jesus will say, it's like they're like dead branches. They don't bear fruit. So I'm going to cut them off. I'm going to burn them. They don't do what I want. But the ones that bear fruit, I'm going to put pain in their life so that they bear more fruit. My Father's the vine dresser. So, guys, all of this is introduced because day 3 corresponds to day 6 when we exist, when we come into being. Okay? So these are themes that are all started in the book of Genesis. This is what happens. You'll see people referred to as good trees or bad. You know, I forget the guy's name that was rising up to be, he was trying to insert himself as king. And anybody know, who was it? Help me out. This is Peter Lightheart's area, not mine. I forget. It's not in the Torah. But anyway, he says he's like brambles. He's like a useless tree is the essence of it. And yeah, so this is the idea. And you'll see essentially in the fall, vegetation takes the route of man, and then you have thorns and thistles. And you see the ram, Abram's ram, and what's he get caught in? The thicket. Yeah, is the thicket something you want to get caught in? Why would you get caught in a thicket, right? I think that the thicket isn't something that's in Genesis 3. It's something that comes as a result of the fall. That thicket's not good vegetation. It's the stuff that when you're hiking in the woods, you're like, I can't wait to get out of this. That's what the ram was thinking, right? And then, of course, where do we see this in Jesus? The crown of thorns. It's where he associates with the negative vegetation in us, okay? And so these are themes that are developed here. And then a very important theme in day 3 is day 3, 3 days, 3-day journeys, 3-day clumps. Where do we see those in the Bible? We see one in Genesis. Hey, Abraham, I want you to take your son, your only son, and I want you to take a 3-day journey. Okay? All right. Jonah, you're not like me. You need to die, and you need to be reborn. You're a bad guy. You need resurrection. So I'm going to bury you in the depths of the sea, and then I'm going to resurrect you on the 3rd day to new life so that you can be all that I want you to be. You need to die. Abraham, you're thinking that life is in Isaac, and life isn't in Isaac the way you think he is. So you need to die. to that thought. And I need to test to see if you are really thinking rightly or not. And as it turns out, Abraham was doing really well. We'll get to that. But where else do we see 3-day? What's that? Excellent, Abel. Yes. 3 days out to Sinai, right? Very good. Where else? Any other ones you can think of? There's a very obvious one. The resurrection of Jesus. And so, what you find is that when you're reading through the Bible and you run into, and there could be more that we haven't mentioned here. When you run into those, you're meant to ponder day 3 and say, okay, day 3 seems to have to do with like resurrection life in some way, shape, or form. How does that correlate to this 3-day? Abel, that's a great one, because Egypt, anytime you go to Egypt, which direction do you go? Down. You go down to Egypt. Egypt is pictured as a place of death. And we know that because Egypt's really good at death. What were the people going to Egypt selling stuff when they traded Joseph? Frankincense? Gum? What was that stuff used for? Embalming. Why? Because Egyptians were experts at death, at dead bodies. They made pyramids to it, for crying out loud. They're really good at death. They handle death well. It's associated with darkness and going down. So when Israel's coming up for a 3-day journey, you got resurrection. That's perfect, Abel. Those are little things that you need to say, okay, what's happening here? How do I work this out? You may not have the answer right away, but you just chew on it. That's what meditation means. One of the Hebrew words used for meditation is used for a young lion laying down, gnawing on a bone. And it says he was meditating. That's what meditation, that's what it is, okay? All right, so let's move to day 4. All right, day 4. So let's just meditate on that day for a second. Netsana, would you read that for us on day 4? Verse 14. Yep. And then there was evening and morning, the 4th day. So guys, look at verse 15. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. So what is the movement in that statement? Up to down or down to up? Up to down. Yep, it's moving down. So you see that trajectory continued. Now, the word used for, see here, it is, how is it here? Okay, look at the word in verse 14, and let them be for signs and for seasons. Okay? Does your text have a little indication there over the word seasons? Yeah, footnote. And what does the footnote say? Appointed times. Okay. So guys, this word for seasons is the Hebrew word for Israel's festivals. Okay? And so here's the idea, that the stars, the sun, and the moon are all given for the marking of the calendar for when to worship. So what this tells you is that creation is a large church. That the orb of creation is a worship center. That's what it's all about. That the main entities in creation are those things which direct you to worship. This is why it's so abhorrent when people worship the sun, moon, and the stars in the Bible, because they're completely hijacking what they're meant for. They're not, the new moon festival is to point you to Israel's festivals. It's to worship. So this is something to pick up that you see there. It's also the same word, that seasons, is the word for the lampstand lights. So that is a further connection between the luminaries and the worship center, which is the tabernacle. They're connected, okay? So that's an important connection to make. And then what's interesting is that we will be called, just like we have an association with vegetation, we also have an association with the luminaries. Where do you see that in the Bible? Where are we connected with the luminaries in the Bible? Oh, okay, what does he say? Help me. Excellent. Yes. Yes. Abel, you said one? Light of the world. Philippians, that you'll shine like stars in a dark place. Okay? I even think that this has something to do with why you rise for the gray head. What does white hair look like? The whiteness of stars, moon. So we are like stars. In Genesis 49, it's in Numbers, Judah is said to be like a star, a rising star. How does Abraham get a concept of his descendants? He's to look at the stars. So why do we have this connection with the stars? Because just as the stars facilitate worship, what are we supposed to be? Facilitators of worship. Just like Paul, we are to reconcile heaven and earth. We are to be like the stars, that when people look at us, the priests were anointed. Jordan calls anointing oil liquid light. When you anoint somebody, they're luminescent. They're radiant. It makes their face shiny. Okay? So we're to be lights. In Acts 2, what happens to people's heads? What's sort of hanging over their heads? Fire. Okay? So they're like these burning candles just walking everywhere. Okay? So these are all these associations that are meant to be pulled from day 4. Okay? And then, of course, how is Christ? It doesn't get more poignant than this. How is Christ announced? With a great light in the sky that helps the wise men, the magi, navigate there and gives the shepherds the location, right? It's all, why did Christ come? To bring heaven to earth, to facilitate worship. These are all established at the very beginning of the Bible. And then, of course, this is a big situation where God's glory is delegated. And he delegates his glory from day 1 to day 4. And to be godlike. Have you ever heard the phrase Messiah complex? Have you ever heard that? No? So that's a phrase people use in the States sometimes to say, like, you feel like you just need to do everything yourself. You've got a Messiah complex. Okay? It's like a criticism. Like, you think you have to do it all or it can't be done right. You've got a Messiah complex. Well, that phrase is so messed up because what does God do and what does the Messiah do? They are the master delegators. That's what being like God is. Being like God is not doing everything yourself. That's such a false understanding of God. God equips. He delegates. John 15:15, Jesus says to his disciples, I don't call you slaves. I call you friends because I'm telling you everything I'm doing. That's what God's like. He is a facilitator. That's why good pastors are not pastors that micromanage everything. Good pastors are ones that equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Because that's like God. Think of how your fruitfulness goes up when you equip someone to do the same thing you're doing? You just cloned yourself. You got two people now doing all that work. So this is what God is like, and we see it very poignantly in the luminaries. Okay. Day five. Okay. So you guys look at day 5 and tell me, is he working down or is he working up on day 5? What does he start with? Because he's into the realm of the earth now. So what's he doing? Does he start with the birds or the fish in day 5? Okay, he starts with the fish and he works up. So there's movement, just like you see from the heavens to the earth, there's also movement from the earth to the skies. Okay? So those are little things to catch, and this will become really clear in just a second, okay? Why that's important, or how we know God is doing that. So what this gives you the idea of is that we are to be like the birds and the fish combined, in the sense that, like, and I was thinking this the other day, isn't it kind of funny that there are some fish that jump out of the water? Like several kinds, actually. Like you see dolphins, you see whales, you see those jumping fish, you see marlins. So you actually see in the water movement up, coming out of the water into the air, okay? And then you've got birds, in the air. Okay, what this is hinting at is that because man somehow has an association with each day, because Jesus somehow has an association with each day, that we are to be like this movement of earth to heaven, which means that we are these intermediary creatures. Intermediary is to connect two realms. That's what priests do. Priests connect two realms. And would you be surprised that Israel and priests had garments that are said to have fringes? That's how it's translated. But you know what that word means? It's the same word for wings. Wings. So that in God's outfit that he designed for his people have 4 wings. 4 wings. What else has 4 wings? The cherubim. Okay, so we are like these intermediary birds that are to connect heaven and earth. This is what we are. Malachi says, the Son of God will rise with what? With healing in his wings. The Son of God will rise. Son of righteousness will rise with healing in his wings. And so then you fast forward to Jesus, and he's walking down, and there's this woman that's had bleeding for 12 years, and they couldn't stop it. And do you know what that meant? Guys, do you know what happened to a woman when she was on her menstrual cycle? What couldn't she do? She can't go to the temple. She can't go to the she can't worship in the way that she wants to, right? So this woman is kept out of the temple for 12 years. Imagine, guys, you had some sickness that you couldn't assemble like we did on Sunday, which was just the highlight. It was such a wonderful time to be with you. You couldn't do that for 12 years. You hear the music, but you can't enter in, okay? And Jesus is walking, and it says that she reached out and touched and it'll say fringe, but the word for that is the wing of his garment, and she was healed instantly. Now she can go and worship, okay? So there's that woman that does that, but what does Jesus do when he looks over Jerusalem, who is about to crucify him? What does he say? Oh, Jerusalem. What? But you were unwilling, right? This woman wasn't unwilling. She was glad to go under his wing. She did it. But Jerusalem said, not for me. So Jesus is the fulfillment of day 5. He is the bird in that sense that we see. Okay. Another thought in day 5 is we're introduced to blessing. So blessing happens 2 times in Genesis 1. It happens with the birds and the fish, and then what does it happen with? Humans. Okay. And land animals. And what is the result of blessing? Multiplication. But like, what kind of multiplication? Like explosive. Like the birds and the fish, like, what does it say about the fish? That they'll swarm. Let them swarm. Fill the waters in the seeds. Birds multiply on the earth. And then when it gets to mankind, it's to fill the earth. So when something's blessed, this is just what you're meant to see. That when something's blessed, it is just with explosive power and vitality. It's like unbelievable blessing. Like it's crazy big, okay? So that's what you're meant to think when you see blessing. And then when we look to Luke 24, you'll see that Jesus blesses his disciples, which will lead to the exceptional blessing in the book of Acts. That you will see it just sort of go, and it ends in Rome, that it made it all the way to the heart of the Gentile world with Paul. So the blessing is just overcoming the earth. Okay, so that's day 5. Let's look to day 6. So day 6, does it work up or down? How does that work? Yeah, I mean, it starts with the beasts of the field, and then it goes to humans. Obviously, there are such things as like giraffes, which are bigger than us, but generally, or elephants. But generally speaking, we're like Saul with Israel. Like we're kind of like the tall creatures of the earth, for most things anyway. And so there seems to be a movement from down to up here as well. Okay, and so dominion is to take place over all things, even the birds of the air. And so this dominion is this vast rule. And the image is meant to fill the earth. Now, when you get to image, in ancient contexts, what you would have is a king that conquered a civilization that was a distant civilization. And so what he would do is he would cast an image of himself. You've probably seen them, where the guy's standing like this, maybe with like a staff or scepter or whatever. And he would have an image cast, and it would be sent to that civilization that he conquered, and it would represent him. And we see this throughout. Like you see Daniel, the image cast that everybody was to bow down to. So you see this. So the image represents rule and character and reign. And this is what God does with humanity. Mankind are images of God that are meant to fill the earth with knowledge of God, so that the knowledge of God, Habakkuk and Isaiah say, covers the earth like the waters cover the sea. So this is what the image of God was meant to do. The image of God was to fill the earth with knowledge of God. Okay? That's the concept taking place here. So you also see, it's not mentioned here, but you see firstborn. Adam is essentially the firstborn of creation here, okay? But this firstborn is something that we'll see, because Jesus will also be called the firstborn of creation, which some people are like, Jesus was not, and then he was. People created Jesus, or God created Jesus. There was a time that Jesus wasn't eternal, and then he was. So this firstborn is introduced here in Adam's coming to being. And it's just important to point this out. When you look through the Bible, firstborn is an interesting thing. Firstborn would get double blessing so that the firstborn could carry on the work of the father, okay? So we'll see that when we get into the law. But let me ask you some questions. Who is blessed of Adam's kids? Seth or Cain? Seth. Was Seth the firstborn? Okay. Who's blessed between Ishmael and Isaac? The text makes it really clear. Abraham gave everything he had to Isaac, it says. Okay. Was Isaac firstborn or secondborn? Okay. Who's blessed of God? Esau or Jacob? Okay. Who's blessed of God? Reuben or Judah? All right. Manasseh or Ephraim? Ephraim. Remember, Jacob crosses his hands and it upsets Joseph. All right. Or you get into David and his brothers. Who is chosen? David or Eliab? David's chosen. Jesse didn't even bring David to the option. Okay. And he's chosen. All right. And David is specifically called the firstborn in Psalm 89:27. We know for sure he wasn't the firstborn, but he's called firstborn. So here's what you find. That firstborn is not, it can mean who was born first, like it can mean that. But more often than not throughout the Bible, firstborn is you are like me above the rest. You are my choice above the rest. Whether your behavior fits it or not, you're my choice. I don't care about birth order. You're my choice. So it's a position, it's a status. It's not a timeline sort of thing. So that's just really important to catch. And of course, was Adam a good firstborn? Did he communicate the Father's heart into the world? No, he failed. And so he'll be like David and Saul, where God says to Saul, you're not like me, I'm going to choose someone better than you. He just straight up says, I'm going to choose someone better. It's like gut-wrenching to have heard that from God. And his presence leaves Saul, and it's with David. And because David was a better representation of his character. So he's firstborn, so to speak, above Saul. Okay? Now, on day 6, we also see a correspondence and an association between man and beast. Because we are created on the same day. Okay? So that's significance, that we have a relationship with the beasts that is unique, like in all creation. We know that Adam names them. They teach him something. They teach him about his singleness because they all have a corresponding mate and he doesn't. And so he learns something from them. You see in Proverbs that we learn a lot from the animals in that sense. They are affected when we fall, they fall. We see them as teammates in the Bible. Noah uses the birds with the ark and the raven, the dove, and they help. They help him. They stand under the same death penalty as us. If an animal takes a life of a human, that animal dies, just like we will if we do. Both us and these animals, our land animals, keep Sabbath. They're not to work on the Sabbath either. And each firstborn from both man and beast is dedicated to the Lord. So we are associated with the animals, okay? Now, that association can either be a positive one or a negative one. We can learn from animals that pushes us up toward heaven, or we can learn from animals that pushes us down to the earth. Okay? And this is a theme that's developed. Mankind is essentially suspended between the beasts and God. Now, the beasts can be used to bring him to God and to facilitate his relationship with God, like we see Noah do with the animals, with the birds. Or they cannot facilitate that relationship, okay? And we can become like them. In the book of Genesis, probably the most beast-like character is who? This is where we read our Bibles closely, and then we step back and we say, has anybody described, I don't know, like really like hairy? Oh, okay, Esau. So remember, the Holy Spirit doesn't waste his breath, okay? He tells you that this guy's really, really hairy, really hairy. In fact, to look like him, you'd have to take animal skin and put it on yourself. That's how hairy this guy is, okay? And, is there anything else in Esau's life that's like an animal? Where does he spend most of his time? Out in the wilderness, out in the woods. Yeah, hunting. What's he hunting? Animals. So he's with the animals a lot. He's kind of hairy like an animal. He spends a lot of time with the animals. Now, what are animals like when it comes to food? Is it easy to keep, the dogs out in the street, if I drop some food, would it be easy to keep them away from it? Or would they, go for it? Yeah, they'll scrounge it up. They'll eat it up, right? Would a dog know the difference between a birthright and a blessing and some food? Surely a dog wouldn't know the difference, but a human would, right? This blessing of God, it's what everybody's after, the whole Bible. Wouldn't a human know that birthright and blessing is far more valuable than food? Wouldn't a human know that? An animal wouldn't know that, but a human would. But does Esau know that? No. Esau pounces on the food and forsakes his birthright. Abraham goes to great lengths to not get a wife from the Canaanites for his son Isaac. Great lengths. He's getting close to death. He tells his servant, whatever you do, do not. Even if you can't find someone in Haran, you come back here and you do not get him a wife from the Canaanites. Do not do that. And what does Esau do? He doesn't get one from the Canaanites. He gets 2 and 3. Esau is a beast. He's an animal. It's what he's like. He pounces on food to the neglect of much better things. Instead of the beast facilitating his relationship with God, he became like a beast. We'll see Abel be a shepherd, and those beasts facilitate his relationship with God. Right? So the fact that we're both created on day 6 creates an association between us and the animals. And the question is how? How? And that's the stuff to watch for. Okay, and so this is the idea as we get to the end of the creation narrative. Look at chapter 2, verse 4. Chapter 2, verse 4, and we're going to talk about day 7, a couple things next here. But look at 2:4. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. Okay? So, do you see what he did there? What did he do? What should you notice in that passage that I've been trying to point out in the creation narrative? This is the day that he made the heavens and the earth, in the day that he created the earth and the heavens. Okay. This is recording the day that he made the heavens and the earth, in the day that he created the earth and the heavens. What's he doing? He's saying heaven's coming down to earth, and earth should be going to heaven. There's an exchange taking place, that we are meant to be a people that are not earthbound, but heavenbound. We're to be looking up. What happens with Cain? Hey, Cain, why has your face, what? Why has it fallen? Why has it went down? If you do what is right, won't your countenance be lifted up? What was Cain focused on? Abel used his animals to facilitate his relationship with God. Cain used his produce to make him more earthbound. We know that. And you say, well, he brought his produce to God. Yeah, but he brought of the produce of the ground. He didn't bring his first fruits. He didn't bring the best. He just brought of the ground. And when you get to the law and it says what you need to bring of your produce, it indicates the best of it. And so Cain allowed the earth to make him earthbound. Abel used the earth to make him heavenbound. And that's what the whole creation narrative is about, is that earth has a trajectory up just as heaven has a trajectory down. Okay, last thing before we go to day 7, and we'll try to, if we could finish day 7 before lunch, that would be a huge win. And lunch is at noon here, so let's really rush here. All right, another thing just to point out throughout the creation narrative is something that you'll see. We went through day 6. Oh yeah, so we'll get to day 7 in a sec. But is this concept according to kind? According to kind. Okay, it's said numerous times throughout the creation narrative, whether vegetation, animals, according to kind. And this is like creating differences, right? That this is like this and this is like this, and they're different. This is their kind, this is that kind. So then you go to the law and you find similar statements. Like, when you sow your seed, don't sow two kinds of seeds together. Remember that? Okay. When you make clothing, don't mix the fabrics. Okay? When you plow, don't plow with a donkey and an ox. Don't plow with two different kinds of animals. Okay? So you find these things condemned in the law. And what is the thought behind that? Okay. So here's the thought. The thought is that the ancients believed that when you intermix things, you send the world back into chaos, and you release divine energy that way. So if you break boundaries, it releases like a liberation, like a new divine energy, like the first creation. Because the first creation was like not chaos, but it was just a watery mass, and God created it. All right. So that's what they believed. Now, is intermixture bad? Well, we just said that God condemns it. Do you also know that there were things that were intermixed? For instance, do you know that the priest's garments were mixed fabric? Okay. So here is the deal. Why does God create according to kind And he also has intermix. Okay? And this is how we started this morning. Okay? What is the art of wisdom? Can anybody repeat that? The art of wisdom is the ability to say, this is like that. Okay? What is that doing to this and that, which are both according to their kinds? It's intermixing them. Okay? All right. Here's the deal. The priest's garments had intermixed fabric. The priest's garments took the tabernacle, which we'll talk about. One of the images of the tabernacle is that it's the cosmos, that it has elements from the entire cosmos represented in it. And nearly every piece of the tabernacle was on the priest's garments. So, like a little snippet of the tabernacle. It was like God had, when he's designing the priest's garments, he had someone take his scissors and go to the tabernacle and say, take a little piece of everything that's on the tabernacle and put it on him. Okay, why? All right, the reason distinction is good is because it shows the vastness of who Christ is as it's all intermixed in Christ. So, distinction is good so that it can show the exhaustiveness of Jesus. Intermixture is not bad. It happens on the priest. And that is a picture of all things being united in Christ. Okay? So, distinction is good so that you can see the expansiveness of Jesus. Okay, any of you guys engaged? No? No engaged guys here? Engaged? Okay. You've gotten a diamond or no? Okay, that day will come. Yeah. So let's talk about a diamond. So a diamond is one stone, correct? All right. But what shows the brilliance of a diamond? Different what? Cuts. Okay? So a diamond is shown to be as glorious as it is through the distinctness of several cuts on it. Okay? That is the concept of according to kind. The distinction is good in that it shows the brilliance of the one that it's all interwrapped in, who is Jesus. And that's represented in the priest wearing all these different things from the cosmos. Okay? And so that's why according to kind is good. Now, I'm not going to go into day 7 until after lunch, but because I want to answer Abel's question. Okay, so guys, why did God do it this way? Why did God create in such a slow way? As far as, now, yeah, it's just a week, and by the way, I believe it's a literal week, but why did he create it systematically? Why did he create it a watery mass, formless, void, darkness over the surface of the deep? Why did he create a boundary between heaven and earth? Why did he do this instead of just doing it like that? This is before sin. There's no sin. Why did he do it this way? Any thoughts, Asais? Love it. Love it. And in Jeremiah 4:23, I believe it is, this exact Hebrew term, I think it's like tohu vabohu, will be used of Israel. That in their sin, they've become formless and void. And so, or the land will become formless and void as a result of Israel's sin, which for the astute reader of Genesis would be able to say, if God did this with creation, he can do it with us. And so, yeah, that's a great answer. Good. Anything else? Okay, here's what I'd want to throw before you in answer to Abel's question. Because there's no sin here. There's no sin. None at all. When we get to describing the clean and unclean animal, one of the things that you'll discover about clean animals is that do you remember the two features that it's pointed out about a clean animal? There's two features. What are they? Okay, it has to do with their hooves or lack of hooves. Yep, that's one. What's the other one? Chewing the cud. Okay. All right. Here's what I think the answer is as far as why God created the way he did. Serpents, how do they eat their food? They swallow it. They swallow their food. How do carnivores eat their food? Is it like how does a shark eat his food? Yeah, lions, bears, they just go into it, right? Okay. It's ravenous. It's quick. It's like pouncing on it. Whereas the clean animal is like if I were to say this is like what the clean animal sat like, the clean animal is like, they chew. They think. They're not like, they're thoughtful. The key is they're patient. They're patient. They're not hedons. They're not like just like all flesh and just base and carnal and just like, they're thoughtful. They chew. They look around. And here's the big key that will help us the rest of the Bible, specifically the rest of the Torah. People of God are patient. One of the very notable things the author of Hebrews says about Abraham is that he waited in patience for God and for his kingdom. That he died not seeing the promises fulfilled in their full, but he died in waiting. That he was not a let me at it sort of person. Okay? And I think the reason God created creation the way he did is because God is patient. It's in his character. And he methodically and patiently works toward amazing things. And so we'll see this in Adam and his reception of Eve. That didn't happen like that. It'll say that God saw that it was not good that man should be alone. And every one of us would think, then put it in the fast cooker and let's get Eve. Let's do this, right? And he says, so hey, Solomon, I want you to go and I want you to name the animals. And you're like, wait a minute. Didn't you just come to the conclusion that it's not good that I'm alone? Now Adam doesn't know that God had that thought, because what is he doing? He's introducing Adam to the patience of waiting and the glory that follows, right? That's what he is up to with Adam. Let me ask you this. Was Jesus sinful at all? No, of course not, right? Okay. Then how did he grow in obedience? How did he grow in obedience and wisdom and stature with God and with man. How did Jesus learn obedience if he didn't have any sin? The answer to that is the way that Adam grew in faith in receiving Eve. Was there any sin involved with Adam? No, it was before the fall. Was Adam sad that there wasn't a partner like him? It says that for Adam, no fitting helper was found. Okay? Does that mean Adam's sad? Are you sad when you look for something and don't find it? I'm sad. Is that sin? Apparently not yet. Now, it can morph into sin, but the longing for something, and you say, well, how do we know that Adam longed for Eve? Well, I'll tell you this. When he got Eve, he breaks into song. When's the last time something happened to you and you just break into song? Unless you're very happy that this just happened. And then what he says when he sings, the lyrics of the song are, this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Why would he say at last if he wasn't longing for Eve, right? No sin there. Pure joy, pure bliss, because there was deep longing. Here's the deal. How did Jesus grow in obedience? God the Father did that to Jesus his whole life. Satan did it to him even. Look at this. You'll get this. Look at this. Do this. Why don't you do this? And Jesus waited. He was patient. And God says, he's patient all the way in obedience to the cross. For this reason, Paul says, his name will be lifted higher than any name, above all names, to the glory of God the Father. So, Abel, short answer, why did God create the world as patiently as he did? To facilitate patience in us, waiting for heaven to come to earth, instead of trying to carve out earth right now, like Esau, and like we'll see a lot of other people in the book of Genesis. They wanted it right now, and it all went to hell is what actually happened, instead of to heaven.